Good morning, Galaxians, and welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about just cross-listing and how I use List Perfectly, which, to be fair, is not anywhere near what its total capabilities are, but it's a workflow that it works for me. There were some questions last week about listing on other platforms, listing on Etsy, listing on Mercari. So I'm just going to kind of show you, like we did last week with the kind of the book photos and the research process, just kind of what my process looks like. As always, this is just one person's way of doing things. If you can get some ideas from it and kind of get a feel for how List Perfectly works. Again, I'm only scratching the surface of what it does. If I were starting over with List Perfectly, I would probably do things differently. I would probably do my listings there. But as it is, because I already had 8,000 listings created, I still choose to do everything first on eBay, like what you saw last week, and then use List Perfectly essentially as a bulk cross-posting service to move things over to the other sites that I want to sell on. So that's kind of the process we're going to go through today. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me at any point as I go through it, and I'll be happy to try to answer them. There is, if you decide you're interested in trying List Perfectly, there is an affiliate link in the show notes and the video description down below. You can click that, and I believe you get 30% off your first month. So it's a good way to get in and try various levels of their service. I'm on the business plan, which is I pay like $49 a month for. And usually by the second or third day of the month, I've made enough in sales on these other platforms to pay for that service. We talk about, all sellers talk about cross-listing and the importance of it, not having all of your eggs in one basket. To be fair, as I talk about here pretty regularly, 80% of my business is still on eBay. So if something went really sideways on eBay, I would still be in trouble. But cross-listing has essentially increased my business by that extra 20%. That's sales I would not be making if I wasn't doing this. And that adds up to be a fairly substantial amount of money. So before we get totally dove in there, let's say our good mornings here in the chat. Lord Jake Ryan, good morning. Good to see you. Brandon, Media Picker, thank you for coming out. Black Cat Flips, good morning. Glad you were able to make it. Hopefully it's interesting. I never know going into these whether they'll be useful or not. Chuck Witt, good morning. Nice to see you. Mel, thanks for coming out. Are you able to list sites that it can do? Yes, they will. It will actually show up on the screen when I get in there, all of the sites that it's compatible with. So you'll get to see that. Elizabeth Wilson, good morning. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for all the videos. Learned an incredible amount of information from you. Hopefully, I try. I'm trying to give back. And again, as I always say on these shows, kudos to the folks who come out here, particularly on the Wednesday live shows and in the chat, share with each other things, tips, tricks. Last week, we got a really good one on using the mobile app. Was something I've been on eBay on the mobile app every day pretty much for the last 5 years and did not know that you could do. So again, a shout out to the community for what they share every week. Jim Lucas, good to see you. Thanks for coming out. Magic Aces, hello. So let's get stuck into this. And I'm going to normally I do a split screen where you have to look at my ugly mug while we do this, but I'm just going to put this on the main screen. So if you're watching on a smaller device, hopefully you can see it better. So I'm on my listing screen in the Seller Hub on eBay. And I created 10 new listings this morning after I did my shipments. So we had something to work with. So generally what I will do, as I talk about, I'm promoting all my listings in the promoted listings general campaign. So as I do new listings, they don't automatically go into that campaign, which the key here is that it makes it easy for me to find my newest listings, because every time a listing renews or you do a new listing, it shows up on your screen. And you can see here, I've got a ton of listings, things that are on sale, that are part of my sale. And every time there's a new renewal, it shows up there. So if I do 10 listings over a 90-minute period, they're going to be interspersed with dozens, sometimes hundreds of other listings, depending on how long it takes and how much stuff is actually moving into renewal. So I don't promote right away, and I go over here to all filters and I click on promoted listings. And again, if you can see, it may be small on your screen. It says I have 11 eligible to be promoted. And if I click on that and hit see results, it is going to bring me up all the listings that are eligible to be promoted that I'm not currently promoted, which in this case is the 10 I did this morning and one that I know I'm not trying to promote because I have one of only 2 copies of this particular book. And if somebody's searching for it, I don't think it needs to be promoted. So here are the 10 that I did this morning. Now, List Perfectly is a browser extension. I use it in Chrome. It does also work with Microsoft, whatever it is these days, Edge, I think it is. I don't use it. As soon as it pops up, I delete it. I'm a Chrome guy. I like Chrome. So, but it's a browser extension that allows you to do things within the browser window and then populate those 2 other sites. So I'm already logged in, and you can see here, these are my listings that I did this morning, plus this random $1,000 book down here that I'm not promoting. And what I'm going to do, like I talked about last week, anything that qualifies to be on Etsy. So it's vintage. It's older than, I think their cutoff right now is like 2005, maybe, and is $12.99 or higher, which is an arbitrary cutoff point that I selected because of the 20-cent every 4-month renewal fee over there. I didn't want to be paying for books that were $5 and end up spending a lot of money potentially renewing a long tail listing multiple times. So $12.99 was just a number I kind of pulled out of thin air, but that's my cutoff point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit here, and this is one of the advantages to the business plan. You can do this bulk cross posting. So start selecting, and this is a mishmash of listings that are above and below that number for today. So I'm going to do the ones that are going to go to both Etsy and Mercari first. So $12.99 and up, and it's got to be vintage. Everything I did today was older, 1940s and 50s era. So you just start clicking in one of the boxes. You can kind of click anywhere on the screen that you want. So there's one that's $14.99. Here's one that's $12. Here's one that's $17. And that's it. So I've got 3 today in what I've done so far that for me qualify for what I'm going to do to put them on Etsy. And again, everything goes to Mercari because it's free to list over there. When you've got the ones selected that you want, you just hit stop. And here's where it shows you which sites you can transfer to. You can import them directly to List Perfectly, which if you want to use their software to do kind of the automatic delisting and kind of use them as the source of all of your inventory control, you would just import them there and work from there. I am, as I said, not using them in that way, partly because I pick and choose. I don't send everything to all the sites, and for my workflow, this has just worked out to be easier. You can cross-post to and from any of these sites. So Depop, eBay, Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, Grailed, Instagram shops. They do still have an icon here for Kidizen, but they, as you may recall, last fall ceased operations. So that's why it's grayed out. Mercari, Poshmark, Shopify. I think this is Vinted. And this is another List Perfectly option. I'm going to do Mercari and Etsy because I want to cross list both of these to those 2 sites. And then you just click copy, and it is going to open a new browser tab on both of those sites for each of the items that we just selected. And then we'll go through kind of the listing process. There was a question again last week about doing the listings over on Etsy and kind of what's involved there. So the first thing that comes up on Etsy, as you can see on the screen, is kind of what they call core details. So what is this? Is it a physical item or a digital file? Mine are always physical items, and that is what it's selected by default. It asks who made it. Was it you? Was it somebody in your shop? Or was it another company or a person? These were all made by someone else. I didn't make these books. I bought them. What is it? Is it a finished product, or is it a supply or a tool to make things? These are all finished products. And then it asks, when was it made? And you hit this drop down and you can see the whole list here of times. So if it's before 2006, Etsy considers that vintage and you would be allowed to list it over there, assuming it's a category that would make sense. If it's 2006 or newer, it doesn't qualify. It's not, if it's a tool or something, or if it's craft and you made it, you could do that. But for vintage items, it's got to be older than that. This book, and handily lists perfectly, displays over here on the right a little window of what you're transferring over. So I've got all the information, so I know the date. I don't have to try to remember it. This is from 1941, so I'm going to select 1940s here, and you notice that box at the bottom there dropped out. So if it's newer, it requires a production partner. So this is kind of for things that you're having made, like print on demand, that sort of stuff. Or if you had a book made that you want to try to sell, for instance, you would have to select a production partner. Who was the printer of that item? In the case of vintage stuff, that is not required. So when you select that, that box just completely disappears. Click on continue, and you will see that it starts to fill in on the main screen. It captures my title. It starts loading my photos. Now it only loads, unfortunately, Etsy is still in the Stone Age with just 10 photos. So it doesn't show everything. As you know, if you were here last week for the listing thing, I will do generally a minimum of 12 and sometimes as many as 18 or 20, depending on what the item looks like. Etsy only is going to get the first 10, which is fine. It's usually enough to give people an idea of what the item looks like. Get their recommendation for putting in a video. You can see what your thumbnail looks like. You can see it's already filled in my description, which is the exact thing that I had on that listing over on eBay, so I don't have to do anything there. It's imported the price. It's imported my quantity. It's imported my SKU, my custom SKU for my inventory tracking, so I know where I can find that. I do have accept offers set up on Etsy, so this box is ticked by default. I will accept any offer on Etsy up to a 20% discount from my listed price. So that is already ready to go as well. Then you go down here. Here's your core details. It's already filled in because that's what we did on that initial screen. And then the only things you have left to do are your category. What is this? This is a fiction book. This is a novel. And to be fair, some of the categories on Etsy, particularly in books, and it's the same on Mercari, are not great. They don't really have kind of a super level of granular detail that eBay does, for instance, and that's one of the reasons this does not import. So I got to go in here and I'll tell it it's a fiction book and just tick it. I don't generally fill in colors or any of that. I don't do tags on any of the sites. I haven't found them to be particularly useful. You can let me know in the chat. Do you use tags? Do you find them helpful? And if so, on what sites? Are they better on Poshmark than they are on some of the others? I've not found them to be particularly helpful, so I just skip all that. Materials, if this was something that you were making, you would put in the materials. This is just a book, so there's really nothing to fill out here. Then you get to shipping. I have shipping profiles already set up within Etsy, so I just go to select my profile. These are going to go media mail, so I just apply that profile, and you can see it imported the item weight and the package size that I input over on eBay. So that is all done already as well. Then I go down here, what section of my shop, if you have set up your shop with different sections, books, CDs, I see some sellers that really break down, like they have history books and literature and fiction and all that. If you have those, you would select your section here. I just do books. You can choose to feature or not this listing. I don't feature new listings. And then you have your renewal options, whether you want it to automatically renew every 4 months or if you want to manually renew those. I'm set up on automatic. Once I've listed these, I just want them to kind of stay like they do on eBay, good till canceled, until it's either sold or I delete it. I leave it on there, even though I know it's going to cost me 20 cents every 4 months. Again, that's why I've set that kind of dollar minimum. Once that's all set, just click on publish. It says you are about to publish a listing. There's a non-refundable fee of 20 cents. For each new listing. By publishing, you agree to pay this fee. They will deduct it right from your earnings As with all these sites, you do have to have a credit card in there. So in the event you don't have any earnings, they have some way to charge you for this. Publication date will reset to today's date, and the listing will expire 4 months from today. You can turn off auto renew at any time. So if you decide later, you know what, I'm tired of some of these renewing, I'm going to go in and change them, you can do that. Then just hit publish, and you will see that it is loading. List Perfectly gives you a little pop-up here that says, do not close this tab. List Perfectly is confirming that it is listed. And that is that. That book is now available. It does not show up just yet here because these are all the previous listings. On the next one, you'll see that. So that book is now up and live over on Etsy. Now we're going to do the same process for the same book, this time on Mercari. And it's the same thing. You can see it imported all the pictures. It imported the title and the description. Mercari always attempts to determine the category and where it fits, the subcategories. It's really, really not good at it. Now, in this case, of course, as soon as I said that, it's essentially perfect. It's got it listed as a book. Sometimes even if you have book in your title, it will try to put it in another category, and you just click the drop down and change it. But it does have that right. I'm going to go ahead and do this. It was a fiction book. This is actually historical fiction, so I'm going to change that. So again, they do have a little bit more detail than what's available for books over on Etsy, which is good. They want you to select a brand. If it's in there, you can use it. In most cases, it's not, or it is, they don't have it in there correctly. So 99% of the time, I just select no brand. Condition, you'll notice Etsy did not ask for condition, which is why I make sure it's always in the description. So if somebody goes to that listing, they can see this is good, this is acceptable, and there's a little bit of a blurb there. Like for instance, on this one, I put condition is acceptable with some shelf wear and minor damage to the dust jacket, light tanning of pages as shown. Somebody can then look at those photos and get an idea of what specifically I'm talking about. But because Etsy does not have a condition category, that in your description becomes particularly important. I don't know why they don't do that, but they don't. Mercari does. This is going to be one I would call fair. And then again, you have your shipping options. If you want to use a prepaid label from Mercari, you can select that. I do ship on my own and provide free shipping and just add the price that I know it's going to cost to ship this item into the price. So it by default has ship on my own. It pulled in my price, less shipping, $14.99. I know this is going to cost $5.38 to ship. I'm going to round that to $6. So I'm going to call this book $21. Smart pricing, I do not use. They have stopped their offers, kind of best offer type program. People can still make offers, but they used to have where you could set in like a minimum acceptable amount. They've since done away with that for some reason. So all you've got is their smart pricing, where they automatically will lower the price by a certain amount. I don't use it because it starts happening within like 24 hours. I'm not willing to discount these items quite that quickly. Again, just click list and it will come up and say listing completed. Your listing is live. So that essentially is that. And here's the tab for the next book, Road to Survival by William Vogt from 1948. And we'll just go through the same process. I'll just do a couple more of these. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions while I run through these, and then I'll come back and address those. And you can see when I'm not talking, this process goes pretty quickly. This is one of those that doesn't really have a category. This is a book about environmentalism. I'm just going to call it a reference book. But you can see as I scrolled through there, those things were not even filled in. You can be quicker than the cross-posting software is and kind of keep the process moving, and those things will fill in as you scroll on down. So that's all good. It keeps the process moving along. Again, select my shipping profile. Let's go in media mail. £1.50. It's a book. Done. And again, you just wait to make sure that and there you can see on this screen, there's the book we just did a moment ago. It is now showing up in my listings. That book is done. and we move over to Mercari. Same thing, books you can see here where this has this wrong. This is not a fiction book. This is actually an environmental book. I'm going to call it an educational and instructional book. It also is in fair condition. It's a ship on my own. It's 13 plus again, 538. I'm going to round to 6. We're going to call this book $19. List. And that one is up. And you go back over here and there's the next one for Etsy. This one's from the 1930s. This is a small one. This is only 13 ounces, which is good. So you can see, again, if you're not trying to explain the process as you go through it, how quickly you can do these. Literary fiction, I like that. We're going to go fair. 18 and 5, we'll call it 23. Mercari's been having an issue over the last couple of weeks where you'll try to list something and you'll get this error message. Your item could not be listed due to an error. Please return to the home screen and try listing the item again. You don't need to do that. If you just click list again, 99.9% of the time, it will go ahead and list it, which is awesome. So those are now all done. And you could go in, let's just go to Etsy and pull up my listings. And you can see there are the 3 books that I did just now. They are listed on Etsy. They would be in my shop right now and ready to be purchased. So those are all finished and done with. And you can just close those tabs then. And now we're going to go back because I had some other ones that needed to be done over on Mercari. So we'll just do the same process again. We're going to start selecting. Now I'm going to do just the books that we didn't do in that first run. So all the cheaper ones, $5.99, $5.99, $7.99, $5.99. You can see I sell a lot of cheap books. So that's 6, which would be right because I've got that extra one there. Yes. Stop. I'm going to deselect Etsy because I just want these to go to Mercari. And again, just hit copy and it will do the same process. It'll open those tabs and allow me to do those. While those are loading, because they do take a minute, I'm going to get back here into the chat real quick. Big Dre, good morning. Good to see you. Juan, cross-listing is 100% part of our long-term strategy. List Perfectly helps us make that happen too. Yes, I've been a fan. I know there are other programs out there. We had Colorado Rewarn on here. Gosh, a couple of months ago, she uses Vendoo and she's very happy with that. So if you have big quantities of listings, you can see where having some sort of software assistance makes this process much, much quicker than if you were trying to do it manually. If you're only doing a handful a day and you want to manually cross-post, you can do that and save yourself the expense. But there are days I might do 30, 40, 50 listings in a day. And to try to cross-post all of those and manually transfer the photos and the descriptions would just be an enormous amount of work. So having these programs, I am more than willing to pay $49 a month to have this process kind of be automated. What percent do you promote on eBay? I am using their variable rate with a cap at 7% currently. When I initially started, I was doing 5, and a couple of summers ago, I was going through a bit of the typical kind of summer slowdown. So one of the things that I tried to do was to bump that rate up to 7, and that did improve my sales. So I left it at 7. Last year, I bumped it to 8 for about a month just to see if that would make any difference because, as you're aware, if you use promoted listings, eBay is always giving you a pop-up recommending that you promote at a higher rate. They kept telling me you might get better results with 8%. So I went to 8, and I did not see any difference. So I went back to 7. I know there are some other people here in the chat who are using higher numbers than that. And again, if you use the variable rate with a cap, sometimes you won't pay the full percentage, particularly as you start to ramp up into higher ones. In my case, with a max of 7%, I'm paying 7% essentially on almost everything. They kind of moved The floor was originally 1%. Then they moved it to 2. Then they kind of did this thing last fall where if you're under 5%, they're really not promoting your listings all that much. So as that floor has risen, obviously that window of opportunity to be less than your cap when you're only at 7 has really gotten small. So 7 is essentially everything for me, but I know there are a couple people that may be here in the chat that are using a higher percentage and may not be paying kind of that max every time. Media Picker says Vendu is expensive as heck. Yeah, I never really looked into it. Again, with List Perfectly, there are multiple tiers. There's a basic program, which is less. There's a Pro and a Pro Plus. They have a whole range depending on how you want to use the software. Again, for me, the big thing was I wanted to be able to do that bulk cross listing. I want to be able to get in there, select my 6, 8, 10, 15. Normally, I try not to do many more than that because you get that many tabs open. It can start to bog down your your system a little bit. So 10, 12, 15 is about the max I will try to do at any one time. But to be able to go, I'll sit for whatever it takes, an hour, 90 minutes, and I'll do 10 or 12 listings. Then I'll take a break and I'll do this cross post process. Then I'll go back and do more listings and just kind of that's my workflow throughout the day. Do some listing, cross post them, go back and do some listing, cross post them, and the software is just fantastic for that. Magic Ace says, I live in Defiance, Ohio. Would love to do a little road trip, come down and take you out for lunch and hang out. Absolutely. Come on down. We'll try to hit some estate sales or something. My email is in the YouTube channel header, but it's galaxycds@gmail.com, or you can reach me by DM on Instagram at galaxycdsrocks. Yeah, feel free to send me a message and we'll hook something up. Defiance is a pretty good haul from here. I'm in Hamilton, down around Cincinnati. I do a lot of my sourcing actually in Dayton, so maybe that would be a little better meeting point once estate sales really get kicked back in. So let's hop back over and finish these last ones to Mercari, and then my work here for the day. Wow, it's not done. I wish it was done. I got to do more listings this afternoon, but at least this batch will be done. Again, you've got your title, your description. It is not super accurate. Again, it did recognize that it's a book, but it's got this as a reference book, educational, instructional. It's actually a history book, nonfiction. Again, here's a case where Mercari does not offer history under nonfiction as an option, so it just has to be an other nonfiction book. I wish they would fix that, although now with 9,000 plus listings, may not be interested in going back and updating all those anyway. But anyway, this is fair, no brand, ship on my own. This was a 2-pound book. I know it's going to be about $6 to ship, so this one's 12. And on to the next. I don't wait for that to load. I'll go back in a minute before I close that tab and make sure it got it. Ides of March, book, fiction, literary. I will take that. This is also fair condition, 6 and 6. This is a 12. Sure, that one took. Dr. Faustus, another novel, literary fiction. See, as soon as I start talking smack, stuff works. 8 and 6, that's 14. No place to hide. This is a history book about the atomic tests in the Bikini Atoll area. So nonfiction, other, fair, no brand. This is a light one, so this is going to be an $11 book. And you can see, like I talk about, Mercari is not a ton of my business. It's 2, 3, maybe 4 sales a week. But because it's free to list and because this process is so quick, I don't mind to do it that way. What do we got here? That's a novel. Do 12 on that one. This is another history book. That's in good shape if I remember right. Yep. Mercari does give you a suggested price window. I don't necessarily always find it to be that accurate, so I generally don't even look at it. There are times where it is way too high or way too low. I suppose if you're completely unsure, it gives you something to start from, but it's in this case, it's about right, based on my research on this item. But by and large, they often recommend listing things for less than it would cost to ship them, which obviously is not a great business model. I'll go back and look at these tabs to make sure that they are all complete with no errors, nothing hung up. They're all done. We're good to go. Then the last thing for me is that I will hit that checkbox. I will uncheck this one that I do not want to promote. I will go into my promote and click that on. Here again, you can see, consider a more competitive ad rate cap to drive more sales, update to 8%. They even make it easy. You just click the little button and it updates it. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. I'm going to leave it at 7. Just hit apply. And again, you can see here, they're telling me today's recommended ad rate is 10.7 to 12.2%. As I talk about all the time here, about a third of my sales on eBay come from promoted listings, and that's with a cap at 7%. I tried at 8, and that number didn't really move, which leads me to believe, and it's been consistent like that for that. I've been promoting for almost 2 years, that at least in this category, bumping up to that rate percentage doesn't make sense for me. I'm just going to be paying potentially extra fees on some of these, probably most of these items that are going to sell at a 7% cap. That's just my experience. Again, let me know in the chat, or if you're watching this on Team Replay, in the comments once it's done, what you think of that. But that has been my experience. So I'm leaving it at 7, hit apply, and it will promote those items. And we're done. And that, my friends, is that. Let's get back to the main screen here so you can see me instead of that. One of those did not pop up. I wonder if we sold one of those already. We did. I had listed Catcher in the Rye earlier this morning, a 1951 book club edition, and it's already sold $14.99. Awesome. And we sold an $85 Dunbar book of contemporary furniture while we were just going through that. So it's been a pretty good morning here at the Galaxy. We like that. I talked about a couple of weeks ago, eBay having some issues with automatic feedback not working. And here again, let me share this screen. You can see these are the books that we just sold here this morning. This Catcher in the Rye, just sold it, just listed it this morning. It was in fairly mediocre condition. There were some other ones listed at like $16 and $17.99. I went a little less at $14.99. I've sold this book in less than 2 hours. So that's pretty cool. But you can see here, this feedback, automatic feedback has not worked. So I'll just go in here. I've got stored feedback for that and just do that. But that's been an ongoing issue for weeks now, where 1 out of every 10 are not generating the automatic feedback. So very, very strange. And here's that Dunbar book of contemporary furniture, a preview of next week's What Sold recap, $84.99. I'm into that book for 50 cents. Those, that's why I sell books. You just saw kind of in that batch, if you will, there's a lot of like $6. That's bread and butter. You can see here, this is today's sales so far since I shipped this morning. Here's a $7 book. Here's a $10 book. That's kind of the bread and butter. 85 to 90 of my sales a week are in that kind of sub $15 range, but it doesn't take too many of these, $80, $85 books to sell when your cost of goods sold is 50 cents or $1 to make the math kind of work out. So cool. I like it. Let's get back here into the chat. Magic Asa is looking forward to it. Yeah, just let me know. I'm generally looking at going out, especially as we get into spring, on Fridays. I try to get out to the estate sales. A lot of them start on Thursday, and that gives that mad crowd a chance to get out and go through things first. Books, at least in my area, are not, particularly vintage books, don't seem to be a heavily shopped category. So I can go out on the second or third day of the sale and generally still get some pretty good scores. So that's kind of my strategy. That's why I've picked Friday. Black Cat Flips. I have that same catcher in the rye. I guess I need to check my prices. Yeah, I don't, like I said, there have been a few that have sold. There's a ton of paperbacks, but in hardcovers in the antiquarian category, $16, $17 looked like kind of where the base was. And again, given whatever the condition of your particular item is, I always try to be competitive. And again, my cost of goods sold, super low. That's a book that was part of a big lot. I'm into that for like 40 cents. So I don't necessarily have to try to like hit that max number every time. I'm trying to find that balance between getting as much as I can for it, getting as much as I think the market is fair, given the condition of my book versus all the other ones that are out there. And then with the idea in mind that at that cost of goods sold, a quick flip at $15 makes more sense than maybe trying to get 17 and sitting on it for a month. Again, that one sold super fast. So maybe I was a little low on it, but given its condition, I felt like that was a fair price and obviously found a buyer right away. Boom, done, and move on to the next. So let me know in the chat, kind of what are your thoughts on how you price items? What kind of things do you look at in terms of marketplaces and competitive landscape when you determine what kind of how you're going to price your item versus what you found in comps? I talked a little bit, I think, last week about using even sometimes sites that I don't sell on. I'll go to Amazon or I'll go to Abe Books. If I get a particularly strange one, like that Dunbar book that I just talked about, there weren't very many of those out there. So you had to dig a little deeper to find a price. I had it listed for $99.99. Somebody was watching. Actually, it had a ton of watchers, and I've sent out multiple offers. I sent out another one this morning for 15% off, and someone finally went ahead and picked that up. So, but yeah, let me know in the chat. What kind of things do you do? What kind of other sites do you look at? What kind of categories are you selling in? And how do you determine then where you're going to price stuff? If you have any other questions on either Etsy, Mercari, or List Perfectly, put them in the chat. And again, I'll try to answer them. I'm by no means an expert on List Perfectly because what you just saw is literally all I do with it. It will do a ton more than that. But for me, in my workflow, that's what I need it to do. And it is perfect. No pun intended. I'm going to have to blow up the screen. I can't read your screen name here. It's heck getting old. Sea Squirrel Picks, if I said that right. How often do you reference Bookfinder? I've not used that site, actually. So tell me more. I generally, I start with eBay. And if there is a reasonably large assortment to kind of look at, I won't go any further than that. Because again, 80% of my business is there. That's where most of my competition is going to be. And if I find a reasonable number of listings, I feel like I get a pretty good gauge of the price range and the quality of the listings in terms of what is the actual condition of the item and what's the actual quality of the listing. Are there a ton of photos, or is there no photo, or just a stock photo? Or some of the bigger sites will post just a stock photo or just a single photo, and then the second photo is a blurb for their business, and that's it. And a lot of times I just ignore those because I don't feel those are high value listings. That guy selling that particular book, a vintage book like I've got, to me is not my direct competition, and I will generally ignore their pricing unless there's nothing else there. If there's just one or two, I talked about it on last week's show while we were kind of going through that process, and it feels like, and again, in your niche, you get an idea of what you think a book might be worth, and you get on, and then suddenly you see there's two listed, and they're both asking $100 for their book, and it doesn't pass the sniff test. And that's when I will go and I'll look at some other sites. Are there a bunch of these on Amazon? Are there listings on Abe Books? And in a lot of cases, I'll find that the 2 or 3 listings that are on eBay, those guys are also on Abe Books, and they're also at that same price. And now I feel like, okay, so this is, maybe there's no sold comps, but these guys kind of feel where this is the marketplace. And I'll probably come in a little bit under them, and I always have best offers on, and I'll allow myself a window where if somebody wants to come in and they agree that $99 doesn't pass the sniff test and they want to offer me 75, I may be in that kind of window. So those are kind of the processes that I go through when I'm thinking about how I want to price something. If there are very few listings, I always use Google. I will do that, especially again, if I go to Abe Books and there's nothing, which does happen from time to time. There just won't be anything anywhere. And I'll do Google. And a lot of times you'll find there won't be anything there either. I think I talked about, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, the Missouri Military Academy alumni directory. There was just nothing. No comps, no reference material, nothing to point me to a price on that. I had the same thing. Later in the week, I had a Missouri Military Academy. I came across in one of the boxes of the bulk buy a yearbook, an annual from that school. Again, no comps, no nothing anywhere. Yearbooks on a small kind of random schools like that, I'll generally try to price between $20 and $30. I put that one up at $19.99 and sold it within 3 or 4 days. So, but there was nothing. A Google search it returned lots of results about that particular military academy, but there was nothing. There's no books. There's no yearbooks. There was literally nothing. So at some point, you have to start thinking about similar. I've got this high school yearbook, similar era. I'm going to go with that price, $19.99, $24.99, whatever. And again, the money, as we always talk about, is made on the buy. If I bought it for, in that case, I think it was 40 cents as part of a bulk buy, $20 from 40 cents plus shipping as a flip I will take. Black Cat Flip says, I always price towards the top because I always send and accept offers, so I have negotiating room. Most of my comps come from eBay, but I have used Abe Books for rarer books. And again, that is, I always think about, and that's how I set I talked, I think last week, about when I do offers, I set a minimum acceptable offer. So I'm not dealing with low balls. If I list a book at $19.99, I might be willing to take $16 for it. Again, given my cost of goods sold, I can generally afford to do that and still come out smelling like a rose. So I'll put that in there, but I'm not trying to, and I know in theory, the guy that offers $15.99, you're missing. But from my standpoint, I don't want to deal with, I've got 11,000 plus listings, and I know just from the number of things that come up in my send offers eligible, how many people are seeing those listings. I don't want to deal with dozens potentially of super low ball offers on these items. This is, again, everybody gets to set their business the way they want to. I don't want to deal with that. So I always set kind of a minimum that I know I would be willing to take for that. An example, just this morning, I got somebody who had made a couple of offers, which had auto declined. They reached out and sent a message and said, would I take, this was an old manual from a game. I had it listed for $9.99 with a minimum acceptable offer of $7. And he sent me a message, said, hey, would you take $6 for this? So I looked it up to make sure what my minimum offer was. It was $7. I responded to his message by sending him an offer of $7. I said, this is my lowest price on this. I'd be happy to sell it to you for $7. He bought it within 5 minutes. So it does still work. And it saves me the drama and the trauma of getting ticked off about a $1 offer on a $50 book. It's a great reference tool for seeing other sites across the landscape. Okay, there you go. That's one I may have to look into. Do you know who all it includes? Because there are so many different book sites out there. Abe Books, for me, has just kind of been the go-to reference because they seem to have the broadest assortment of vintage titles. If I was looking for more contemporary stuff, I don't know necessarily that they would be the best place, but on these older books, that seems to be where kind of like traditional booksellers are trying to list their stuff on the vintage side. So it gives me a really nice reference. Mel Flips, it says, I know I price on the low end right now because I had 2 good book buyouts and I have limited space. So there's so many variables for sellers. Absolutely. You got to think about those things. Do I want to store this book or whatever the item might be for weeks, months, years? I mean, I've got stuff I sell, I talk about all the time. I've got stuff I've had in my inventory for multiple years that is finally selling each and every week. I've got 1,500 square feet of warehouse space, and I am at a point where I'm listing more or less the same quantity that I'm selling every week, 100 to 150 items, depending on the week, being listed and being sold. Not necessarily, again, the same 150 items, but I list 150 new ones and I sell 140 from a variety of things that have been listed for a week, a month, a year. So I've reached kind of an equilibrium where I don't really foresee myself needing any more space or to be any more aggressive on price to try to move old inventory. I talked a little bit about my Whatnot experience, moving what we might consider to be duds. You do a bulk buy, and there are a certain percentage of those books that you'll get on, and you see people comment on this all the time. How are these guys making money selling a book for $3.99 free shipping when the minimum to ship it is going to be, $4.63 or whatever it is? And I've tried to use Whatnot as an opportunity to at least claw back a little bit of money on those kind of super low value books. And for me, it's been reasonably successful. I'm selling probably 60% of the stuff I take over to Whatnot, and getting my money back, making a little bit of profit. I am on a brief hiatus of a couple of weeks over there because it just got to be a lot trying to do these shows plus the main podcast plus all the other. I was getting a little crispy, so I'm off Whatnot for a couple of weeks. But that's been a very helpful tool to help kind of move some of the lower value stuff for me. Bookfinder, most of the major booksellers are included, gives good price points. I will have to look that up. I will add that to my arsenal and see how that works out. I appreciate the tip. Thank you very much. Looks like we're 40 odd minutes in here. Yeah, about 48. I usually try to keep these to an hour. So let me know again. Do you have any other questions? Was that little walkthrough of List Perfectly and Etsy and Mercari helpful? Let me know. Again, if you're interested in giving a try to List Perfectly, there is an affiliate link. You can get a 30% discount on your first month over there. If you're not cross-listing and you want to try it, Mercari, depending on your category, there are sellers who are doing really, really well over there. Books is not a particularly good one, but it's free to list, so it pays off. It by itself, even with its low sales, is paying for my List Perfectly subscription. Etsy, for me, has been very, very good for vintage books. It is partly because of how I list over there and partly because of the clientele. It is a much higher ticket, much higher average selling price, much better margins on Etsy. The offsite ad fee notwithstanding, the fees are lower over there. Just as an example, today I had 14 books that sold overnight, 12 on eBay and 2 on Etsy. And I made 70% of the margin on Etsy that I made on eBay just with 2 books. So Etsy can be very, very good. You're not going to do anywhere near the volume over there, but the margins are much, much better, at least in my experience. Is there time limit of how long you can run for on Whatnot? I don't know. I don't think so. I see sellers that are on there what feels like all day. I'll hop on in the morning and see somebody on, and then I'll hop on later in the afternoon, and they're still there selling, and they've got dozens or hundreds of people viewing. So I don't know. I generally try to keep my shows to an hour to 90 minutes just because I don't want to be I don't want to be on here any longer than that, because it's not my primary source of income. If it was, I would probably treat that differently. But I'm not aware of any kind of time limit. It may be hardware specific. I don't know how long you can have if you're doing it on your phone, how long your phone will last sending out that much data with all the video in that, but I'm not aware of a time limit. Big Dre says, I haven't sourced books since last year and will be liquidating the remaining 3 totes of books in my store at a local bookstore, as I've sold all the valuable books, only have cheap long tail. Yep. And I make a trip to different donation centers probably every couple of weeks. I'll take those books that as I go through a box, and I'll find stuff that is not worth trying to list on my primary platforms. I will decide if it's a category of book that I want to try over on Whatnot, and I'll set those aside. I'll eventually accumulate enough to do a history book show, an art book show, a religious book show over on Whatnot. I'll do that. The ones that don't sell end up in the donate pile. Some of those go to the local little libraries in my area. Some of them will go to a Christian-based thrift store. Some of them end up at Goodwill. I don't hold on to like super low value books. I will occasionally build lots. I've got a big bunch of children's books right now, and a lot of those are $5 free shipping, which it's not my marketplace. But as I go through the box, I might find a second one by the same author or from the same series, and then I will maybe create a lot rather than taking those over to Whatnot or instantly taking them to the donate pile. So I do occasionally do lots as well. But yeah, I'm not trying to hold on to those low value books. And again, at the prices I'm paying for those, at generally 50 cents or less a piece, it's not. I've made my money on those lots, usually within a few good sales from them. So writing off a small percentage of those it's not too painful. Big Dre says, I also need to make space for my niche store inventory that I started purchasing this month. Yep. Like we just talked about with what Mel said, you've always got to take in all those other considerations. What else is going on in your business? In terms of space and time, and how you want to run it. Those are all things that you've got to think about. And I think sometimes we see on YouTube, they don't always highlight that this is a business, and there are some decisions that need to be made. And we talked about maybe a couple of weeks ago, some of the YouTube resellers who are doing like the pallet things, and they're breaking down a pallet, but they never show you the end result of what did they do with all that junk, and what did they do with all the duds, and how did they sell the stuff, and where did they list it? They break down the pallet. They show you, oh, this is, these are listed on eBay for X amount of dollars, or on Amazon or whatever. And then you never see them again. Mel flips it. I'm trying to determine what to sell cheap. I'm going to try a Poshmark Live. It's hard to decide what to offer. How do you mean? What to offer on Poshmark, or just what kind of pricing? Again, if there are any Poshmark sellers in the chat, feel free to chime in and help Mel out with that, because I don't sell over there. I don't do their lives. Whatnot has been an interesting one. There was somebody that commented on one of my earlier videos about feeling like Whatnot was flooded with dollar booksellers, and I'm like holding up my hand. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to work through this older, low value inventory, but there are sellers. And again, next week on the live, barring anything unforeseen, we will be back here with Max, Common Ground Finds, who runs a really, really successful Whatnot business, as well as on eBay, to talk further about book selling on those two platforms. We'll also be discussing the eBay, whatever it is, spring seller check-in, which is this Friday. I am going to attend that. We'll probably cover that in some depth, assuming there's anything new there, which, to be fair, has not always been the case recently, in the main podcast on Monday. But I'm sure you will all have questions on that, and Max and I will be happy to discuss that and Whatnot as well, because his experience on Whatnot is completely different from mine. He's taking those higher value books over there and being very, very successful with it. So you can kind of see there's kind of two strategies of what's going on in terms of pricing. Mel flips it. Yes, on live. I have so many books. And I don't, I can't speak to Poshmark, but having spent now, whatever it's been, 4 or 5 months um, observing and selling on Whatnot. I talked about a few weeks ago, there's so many different ways that I see different sellers doing it. Some of them will literally just sit there with their phone in front of a stack of books and be like, if you see something here that you want to see run, let me know. And they'll just create a quick listing on the fly for an individual book that somebody wants to buy, where I am doing a more curated show where I am preloading somewhat detailed listings with photos of the 20 or 25 books I want to run in a particular show. And then when I do my show, I spend a little bit of time showing and talking about each of those books. I'll read the blurb off the back or the reviews or whatever, and spend a little bit more time on that book. And I see sellers doing both of those methods who are super successful with it. So you can kind of pick and choose for super low value books if you want to just build a mountain of them and be there and just kind of show on your phone. Here I've got a stack of, whatever mysteries, and here's some science fiction, and here's whatever, and maybe occasionally just pick one out to talk about just to get conversation going in the show. That is certainly a way that I see a lot of sellers doing it. And it's probably, to be fair, much more time efficient than what I'm doing, spending, half an hour, 45 minutes to create a show with 20 listings. And then doing, I could do 2, 3, 4 times that if I didn't just preload them and just worried about creating an instant quick listing for the items that somebody actually wanted. So again, can't speak to Poshmark, but there you go. Hey, speaking of paper gold, good morning. Let the good news begin. Hopefully there's some good news Friday from eBay. We'll see. Lord knows there hasn't been much recently. It's been rough. Yeah, hope that helps. And Whatnot, again, in particular, there seems to be no right or wrong way, and there's a lot of experimentation, and try things that work for you. Like I said, different sellers have different techniques. They're using different tools. Some of them are like me. They've got OBS and they've got graphics and sounds and the whole nine. And other people are just there on their phone showing a book. And both of those have proven to be successful. So finding like what's natural for you is important, because if you're doing something that you are uncomfortable doing, you'll end up not doing it, is what'll happen. You'll get frustrated, you'll get aggravated, you won't feel at ease. Some people don't want to be on camera. Clearly, I have no problem putting my face in front of the camera. But some people don't want to do that, and you can successfully sell over on Whatnot and never show your face over there. So you can do kind of whatever you want. Last sold today, the mystery ship from 19 Fathoms for $32.99. There you go. And as I talk about all the time, that's the beauty of this business. You're out at dinner, you're asleep at night, you're out like me doing a bike ride or going for a jog or whatever, and your business, if it's set up appropriately, continues to generate sales and activity without you having to manage it. Now, this is by no means passive income, but in a lot of cases, once you've got your listings set up and your store running and operating, there's a lot of things you don't have to go back and touch, and it just continues to generate revenue and, of course, gives you what I talk about all the time, that flexibility. For instance, on Monday, a friend of mine, his father passed away, and the funeral was Monday. I was able to do my shipments in the morning and then just kind of let my business run on autopilot the rest of the day while I was supporting my friend and his family. If you're working a traditional 9 to 5, that is not always something you can do. And that, for me, is the reason that I got into this to begin with. 24/7, 365. And I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. That is also a downside at times. You're trying to do something and you're getting notifications and questions also 24/7, 365. And sometimes it feels like there's no real break from it. Again, to use the example of the bike ride, I'm out on my ride and my Garmin watch is going off with notifications because people are sending messages or making offers or whatever. So there is, while the upside is you've got that constant activity, the downside is you've also got that constant activity sometimes when you don't really want it. Paper Gold says sellers need to learn whatnot. The market is changing, and so is the way buyers choose to buy items. From books to clothes to toothpaste, technology is leading the way. And absolutely, whatnot has changed the game in terms of live selling. You're seeing other sites now try to replicate that. eBay is obviously trying to get into and create a successful live selling experience. Poshmark has been doing it for a while. District Dibdit is really focused on doing some live stuff. If you watch ADHD Dave, I think he has gone so far as to close, or at least temporarily shut down, his eBay store and is moving everything over to live selling over on District. I don't know. I don't follow him closely enough to know if he tried Whatnot and just didn't like it, or if he's not. I think he's involved with District at some level. So, but yes, the way people shop is definitely changing, and hopefully they just continue to shop. I saw a report yesterday that is predicting gross GDP to be down 3%, essentially, for the first quarter of this year. Obviously, lots of folks talking about February in particular was not a terrific month, depending on what platform you were on. So hopefully the broader economic environment does not severely impact us. I think a lot of us are selling things that are niche enough that it probably won't. But the marketplace is definitely changing in many, many ways. And I think it is important on any of these sites, but particularly on Whatnot, that for me, it's been hugely beneficial to just spend time there watching other people's shows and seeing the things that they do, and again, determining the things that I like and or don't like about those, and how I want to incorporate those things into my own show, and things you can do that may help set you apart from others. Again, I talk about pretty regularly the feedback that I get on eBay for my packaging and shipping is generally, if they leave a comment, it is 90% of it is that this was like one of the best packed shipments I've ever gotten from someone on eBay. And I'm getting those same kind of comments from buyers on Whatnot. So that, again, it sounds like such a simple thing, but those little things that you can do to set yourself apart from everybody else who's also trying to do the same thing. We're all out here trying to sell whatever, books or sportswear, whatever it is. If you can do something either in your listings or your presentation or in the way you deliver items to customers, those things all benefit you in the long run. It may seem like taking an extra 2 minutes to wrap a book in newsprint and write thanks on it before sticking it in a bubble mailer seems like a waste of time. I've had viewers on this show tell me you don't need to do all that. But seeing thousands of feedbacks that say this item was so well protected. I had one a couple of weeks ago that the book had actually gotten left on the neighbor's porch. It was there overnight during a downpour, and because of the way that I packed the item, the book didn't get damaged. And that was the feedback that they left. And a potential buyer who sees that kind of feedback is going to feel much more comfortable, in theory, buying from someone who does that little bit of extra. So I know I harp on that little stuff all the time, filling out your item specifics and yada, yada, yada. Those little things seem like maybe excessive, maybe even wastes of effort, but I feel like they pay off over the long run. We are at a little over an hour. If anybody has anything else they would like to discuss before we get out of here, speak now or forever hold your peace. Again, eBay spring seller check-in is Friday. I will be covering that, assuming that there's anything of note or anything new in next week's main episode, which of course will be out on Monday. And then next week we'll have Max from Common Ground Finds here on the live Wednesday at 11 a.m. As always, I appreciate all the tips and tricks that you all provide to each other. And I appreciate you coming out to spend a little bit of your Wednesday here. Since I don't see any more comments in the chat, I'm going to assume that we are good for today. Hopefully you got something out of this. And if you did and you haven't already, please do me a favor. If you're still here, hit that thumbs up button on your way out and let YouTube know this was a good and productive use of your time. I appreciate it. Yes, Max, can't wait. That'll be a good one. So yeah, put it on your calendar next week. Book selling on eBay and whatnot. Store up your questions and let's talk to the experts. With that, my friends, I appreciate it very much, and we will see you next time.